Hello ladies and gentlemen, Panzer here, and welcome back to Crossout. So, a couple of you guys asked me, what sort of build should you use for something lower power score, because a lot of you guys are fairly new to the game, especially since the game's now on Steam. There's a lot of newcomers to the game who might not be aware of exactly what would be suitable for the lower power scores. Now, the last build that I showed was in the sort of 5,000 power score range, so I'm going somewhere a little bit lower here. So this is my sort of low tier grinder, if you will. This is sitting at 2080 power score, and the power score largely depends on the weapons. So now you can make this out of basically starter parts, really. You have the pickup cabin here, which everybody should have. If you've run a few PvP missions so far, you should have this already, and a couple of medium wheels, which you should be able to get pretty early on. Now, the wheels can be substituted with the small wheels. I just prefer the medium wheels for the extra durability and a little bit more grip. Now, the main idea behind this sort of build is you want to have as few parts as possible. This sits at 21 pieces, but you can go even lower than that. These half barrels here are just mainly aesthetic, but they do also help protect the chassis and the lower part of the cabin in case you get hit in the side. The hitboxes on the small barrels are actually reasonably large, so they do actually protect quite well. And of course they add a decent amount of structure. Now, the main thing that you have to bear in mind is a build like this will have very, very low structure points. So what's the best thing to do if you don't have a lot of durability? Well, the simple answer to that is remain as mobile as possible. So that is why this build includes a light engine located underneath there. So if I just go into test drive right here, you can actually see how mobile this vehicle really is. It slides around a little bit, it is a little bit on the drifty side, hence why I've got that spoiler for downforce. But really, the main thing is you can keep that speed up and you can keep the distance up. And that'll allow you to not just be able to avoid as much damage as possible, but also allow you to move around the map a lot more, which can give you a lot of versatility. And that's kind of the main idea behind this build. Now, damage-wise, if we just have a look at the weapons I've got in here, I've got a couple of medium machine guns, but you can do just as well with a set of smaller machine guns, such as the starter minigun or the light machine gun. Those work just as well, after all, compared to the medium machine gun. The main difference really is just the medium machine gun is slightly more damaging, but it does put you in a much higher power score. Now, of course, if I was to swap this out with light machine guns, as you can see here, I can fit a couple more on. I can actually put up to, I believe, 3 of these on here. And that keeps us well below 2,000 power score. But bear in mind that 1,800 or so will still get you matched up with people within the 2,000 power score range. So that's why you want to do as much damage as possible. And which is the reason why I've put the medium machine guns on. Now, I've got an upgraded one here with the slightly longer range. You don't need that, but the extra range is useful. And of course, I have run this with a single heavy machine gun before, which works reasonably well if you can get those consecutive hits. But the main thing is, why machine guns as opposed to shotguns or anything else? Why not autocannons? Well, the simple reason is machine guns are a lot more reliable at medium range. Medium to slightly longer range in that sense. If you want to keep it at medium range, autocannons will do fine, but they're a little bit heavier, so they will slow you down. On top of that, the turret traverse rate of the autocannons is much lower, so compared to those sorts of things, if you're moving and maneuvering a lot, you're not going to be able to keep the guns on target. So keeping yourself stationary while using an autocannon, probably not your best bet. So that is just the basic philosophy behind this sort of build. And of course, you can recreate this very, very simply. I put the fuel tank in there because you do want to get that fuel. The extra fuel can help you to do some trading. It will also help you to run more PvE missions, which will then get you more materials, and so on. So you do want to have that. Now, this sort of build has only the plank and van bumper at the front just to give it a little bit more protection. The most armored part of this vehicle, honestly, is the front. I do have exposed parts here. This improved radiator will allow you to fire the machine guns just that little bit longer, but normally I don't leave parts like that exposed, but in this case, because we're going to be moving around a lot more, it doesn't really matter as much, and I have practiced with this. It does appear that the radiator doesn't even get hit all that often. And of course, the spoiler, while cosmetic, does actually have a fair amount of structure on it, so it will protect it to some degree from the back. So really, something like this is really just built for speed and keeping the distance. Alright, so let's jump into a match, and I'll show you how this thing plays. Alright, here we go, and as you might expect, the lower tier matches are mainly filled with bots, particularly depending on the time of day that you play at. You're going to end up against a lot of bots, and keeping your distance is definitely very, very important. So over here on Ship's Graveyard, we can actually see very far across the map, and we can see an enemy all the way over there. So if we keep our distance and just fire a few bursts over there, we can deal damage without getting ourselves into the line of fire. And that's really just how you play this build. Just keep yourself at as far a distance as you can while still doing damage, and that is what's going to keep you alive. Now, when you encounter other players versus the bots, you do want to keep your distance even more. Let them come to you rather than you going to them. And of course, if they're a little bit more aggressive, turning circles around them might help, but you do want to avoid exposing yourself a bit too much. And of course, in this case, he had far more structure points than I did, and getting yourself slowed down in the water is kind of what got me killed there. But you can see just at first glance already kind of how this build is going to work. Alright, and this is Old Town now, and this is an example of a map where this build might suffer just a little bit, because these tight spaces does limit the kind of range that you can fire at. But the main thing is just keeping your distance from the enemy and trying to deal the damage that way is probably going to keep you alive much longer than, of course, charging in there, which is the same reason I don't run shotguns on this build. Now, you might be wondering why not run cannons. You know, you might have seen the number of cannons that I have in the inventory. And in practice, while it might sound like a good idea, the cannons themselves are more high risk, high reward, given the limited amount of ammo and of course the accuracy required to actually make cannons effective. It might seem like I'm being a little bit too safe, but I'd rather get more consistent damage out than risk running out of ammo, or even worse, miss that shot that you need to land in order to save your own skin. So really, the reason why I'm running machine guns is just kind of keeping myself alive and trying to deal damage from afar. I'm not even going onto the point here, as you can see. So dealing the sort of damage from here is actually what I'm aiming to do. Trying to target the cabins as well from this distance. Now there is another player over there, so I'm just going to land some shots. You can see from basically any distance, I can kind of just keep laying down fire. And of course, if you pulse those machine guns, you can actually get a fair amount of shots onto target before they overheat. So, of course, managing your heat levels is definitely going to keep you in the fight much longer. It is far too tempting to actually try and fire full auto at basically any enemy that you see, and I do realize that, yes, the temptation is there, and I do often succumb to that, but in actual practice, the burst firing of the machine guns is actually far more effective, since you can keep those machine guns up longer. The last thing you want to have is an overheated gun, and then not being able to fire at all. Alright, and last match of the day over here on Control 17, one of the newer maps that was added to the game since its release on Steam, I believe, anyway. Now, this is an example of a map that can actually benefit a build like this. You've got wide open spaces with lots of cover to duck into, and even craters like this, which will allow you to duck out of cover vertically, or, you know, duck in and out of cover vertically, rather. So you can actually use this as a sort of hold down position as you would in a tank. And of course it would suit a tank build just fine as well. Now, I don't like to run tank builds on lower levels. It's just something that never really appealed to me, mainly because I do find them a little bit more difficult to balance power score-wise, and in actual practice, they seem to be a little bit too slow to keep up with some of these faster-moving bots. Even some of the cannon-armed ones can very easily outrun you. Now, I have just overheated my guns here, which is now showing off exactly why you don't want to do that, because the amount of damage I could have done to that bot there would have actually gotten me that kill, and unfortunately, because they were overheated, I couldn't actually do that. Alright, I've got a player coming in here on the right. He's gone in there, he's just gotten himself killed. I'm getting a lot of assists today, or at least in this match. Got a lot of kills in the last one, but that match was over pretty quickly. But there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Just a very quick look at a very simple build, which I think just about anybody can build. And of course, yes, you might think, oh, it's not very imaginative. It's just a pickup truck. It's just a technical. But that is really how you start off playing this game. Now, of course, there may be other more creative builds than this, which can work for you. But ultimately, when it comes down to your own personal play style, then you're not really taking into consideration whether or not it's the power score you're building towards, or whether it's just a build that you enjoy playing. If you're looking for something to just grind those materials out, get some parts, and get some things made, then this could work very well for you. After all, it is still just a 21-piece build, which sits at 2000 power score, and in fact, the matchmaking that we had in the last couple of matches was really just enemies and players that were around 2000 to 2500, which is kind of the bracket that you do want to be sitting in. Now, of course, the more damage you do, the more reward you'll get, and kills will definitely be more rewarding than assists, but even then, being able to deal the damage from far away and save your own skin, even though we only have 400 points of structure, is definitely how you want to play this build. But let me know what you think of this build down in the comments below, and don't forget to leave a like if you've enjoyed the video, and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Also, don't forget to comment down below with any suggestions or ideas of anything you want me to build in this series. Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Panzer, and I'll see you next time.